But when you play this game, this is what comes out of it. Developing countries like Nepal at the top there, $100,000 a ton. Hey, they're more efficient than the USA, which was just in at about $3,000 a ton. The UK, which was in at just over $3,000 a ton. All the developing countries who had not caused the problem, who were arguing for an equitable solution to climate change, who'd got their point registered in the Climate Convention, who came up against a lot of economists who said, to hell with your equity per capita arguments, you must be efficient like us, held up this graph and said, but we are the most efficient. And this dichotomy between what's efficient and what's equitable is completely false. And anyway, your cost-benefit analysis on the basis of no regrets and efficiency gains, how long do you imagine it's going to take the US to become as efficient as Nepal? To go from $3,000 a ton to $100,000 a ton. A couple of centuries, maybe? Have we got that amount of time? They were arguing for what I will come to now, full contraction and convergence. And the point here is arguing for contraction and convergence has been difficult because a lot of people have related to this as some vast kind of communist plot to retake the world in the name of equity. Well, maybe, so what? Arguing the right thing for the wrong reasons isn't really smart. It's more, as the Archbishop of Canterbury said, which is people who think that contraction and convergence is utopian simply haven't looked honestly at the alternatives. Now let's look at Mr. Stern to end this, because you wanted to focus on it. There's more stuff about contraction and convergence, real rates of response that are needed. But if you turn to page 20 and 21, you'll see, I've sent this to him, he's not pleased. Nicholas Stern's great U-turn on C&C. He created his 2006 report during the preceding year and took evidence from everybody, all of whom were warmly thanked for their input, except GCI, which was totally ignored. We'd sent him C&C and all the support for it. If you want to get a feel for the support, it was already true then, the back several pages are the kind of top honchos. You can come to that later. The point was, if we'd simply been ignored, hey, what's new? But he went out of his way in chapter 2 to single out contraction and convergence and declare it, well, a sort of a nice idea, but it's an assertion, not an argument, and it has no political support, and therefore will get no quarter from Nicholas Stern and his team. And he defended this at LSE about a month later, and a student got up and said, Mr. Stern, when is the political tipping point for C&C? And he was completely wrong-footed, and he said, well, it's actually, it's a sort of a very nice idea, but it's too difficult to get your head around. You know, after nearly 20 years of preaching this, usually the criticism is, it's too simplistic, it's the result of a simpleton, you know, dumbass musician just saying a piece of string is this long and working it from there. So he was saying it's too difficult to get your head around. And then you can see over the next pages the moves he's made since then, and the point is, in the Archbishop's parlance, this is a guy who's going through this inexorable process of considering the alternatives and then trying to become honest in the realization that flows from considering those. He says, climate change is the greatest market failure in history, but he got up with the Indians at a UN function shortly after that and said that contraction and convergence was a spectacularly weak form of justice. And I thought, my God, you're actually in the teeth of the gale now, and you're going to attack this horrible equitable monster as being a spectacularly weak form of justice. I wonder what a spectacularly strong form of it would be, i.e. accelerate the convergence rate. He didn't engage with that. A year later, the position had matured to the point where David King, the boss of UNDP, Tony Blair, a list that's considerably represented at the back here, had all converged on this idea that the new Al Gore, I remember him coming and whew, this was a turnaround for him, that the emerging global consensus was the words, as a global cut of 50% by 2050, within which time the developed countries will have cut by 80%. So I kind of sent a message back saying, hey, this is contraction and convergence, this is really interesting. And Stern then added his name to this. And I actually wrote him quite a nice letter saying, it seems, you know, we've got more in common, maybe we should talk. And then he published this paper from LSE calling C&C the key pragmatic part of the global deal we've got to create I thought, this just gets better and better. Unfortunately, at the same time, he published a piece in the American Economics Review denouncing C&C as rights to kill. That really got my goat. Sorry, God, I spent 20 years fighting the economics of genocide, and you've managed to convert it to the point where you're on the white horse and C&C is the rights to kill. How do you argue this? He says, well, emissions kill. Yes. And should we have rights to kill? I don't think so. Now think about it. Think about it. Whether we have rights to these emissions or not, they are happening. They're happening much too fast. They're growing much too fast. And the economists are all coming together creating a global carbon market in which you are going to trade emissions rights.